get our beliefs from the interaction between the world we discover and our innate dispositions, what our genes do build biases into us. For instance, we have a sweet tooth. We automatically like sweet things better than bitter things. And there's no mystery about why that is. There's a deep biological reason why we have a craving for sweet things.
As we have a craving for God?
Indeed. In fact, our sweet tooth is, by general admission, no longer such a good thing. It's sort of outlived its biological usefulness. Now that we live in a world where there's a surfeit of sugar, it no longer helps us. But we can't get rid of it. It's in our genes, but we don't have to indulge it. We don't have to succumb to it. Some people do, but we don't have to. We've learned how to work around our sweet tooth. Now, do we have a sweet tooth for God? Yeah, we sure do.
And you think there's a surfeit of that sweet tooth for God, right? That's what I take. One of the things I take away from your book is that you think we have a surfeit of belief in God.
No, actually, I do not know. Because here's what I don't know. And I say in the book, until we do more research, we just can't tell. We have sugar and we have saccharin. Saccharin is maybe the healthier substitute for sugar, and they both satisfy our craving. Now the question is, religion, is it sugar or saccharin? If it's saccharin, and we cut it out of our diet, we may be in real trouble. Because then we may indulge our cravings, whatever they are, with things which are worse for us than religion.
See, I think this is where your critics really come after you. They say you think that God can be put to a scientific test like everything else. And if God is God, God is beyond the observation and verification process of science.
Oh, God is very definitely beyond the verification process of science. God has been designed to be beyond the verification process of science. This is one of the classic adaptations of religions, is to create this gulf so that science can't get anywhere near God. That's true. But science can understand that very fact.
You say that
science can understand how religions evolved and why. By the way, that idea is completely absent in folk religions, which are the ancestors. The idea of God being, as it were, beyond science. They don't make a distinction between science and religion. In folk religions, it's all the same. It's all one. This is just what everybody knows. And they have no concept of faith. They don't need a concept of faith. It's only once you start getting this separation between science and other things that people think they know when maybe they don't, that's when the idea of faith looms and becomes a very attractive idea. And indeed it is. It protects the idea of God from disproof.
Why is this of such concern to you, Dan? If my faith doesn't pick your pocket or break your bone, as Thomas Jefferson said, why should you care what I believe?
Well, exactly. I wouldn't accept that religious people care so much about what everybody else believes. Why do they care? Why do Christians care what Muslims believe? Why do Muslims care what Christians believe? And to me, the really dangerous thing about religion, and this is not everybody, of course, it's not half, thank goodness, but it's many, and that is the one thing that I think is really dangerous in many religions is that it gives people a gold-plated excuse to stop thinking.
To stop thinking?
To stop thinking. To say, I don't have to think about that because my religion says this is right, this is wrong, it's as clear as that, it's black and white, I don't have to think about this anymore. It's just a matter of faith. Ooh. And we honor that. We say, oh, it's a matter of faith. I think we have to stop honoring people for stopping thinking. I think we have to say to people, fine, you have your faith, great. Your job then, your duty to your own faith, is to explain to those of us who do not share your faith why you're right about this. Let it be true that God told you. Let it be absolutely true. God told you this is the right way and these ways are wrong. Right. Your problem now is to explain to those of us that God didn't speak to why this is right.
But as that story I told of what happened in the Presbyterian Church in Austin when the Christians denounced the minister for allowing an atheist in the congregation, and the atheist denounced the atheist for surrendering to the superstition of the church. You can't have a real dialogue between people who say, I'm speaking for God, and people who say there is no God to speak.
Well,
can you?
I don't see why not. It seems to me that those people who have their faith, who believe so strongly in God, if they really believe strongly their God, they believe they're right, they believe that they occupy the moral high ground, they should be only too willing to sit down and put this not to the scientific test, but to the political, moral discussion test of talking about why they believe what they believe. And let's talk about, the main thing we want to talk about is what should we do? What's the moral course of action to take? And if that is to be a reasonable discussion, we have to take a few cards off the table.
Such as?
The faith card. We have to take the faith card off the table.
What do you mean take the faith card off the table? I mean, if one is a man of faith, one can't take the gene out.
Well, you know, Lucille says you're wrong. You know who Lucille is? She's a friend of mine. She's always right. I can't play that card in an argument. It's just rude of me to say, you know, Lucille says you're wrong. You say, well, who's Lucille? I say, well, friend of mine, always right. End of the discussion.
But we're confronted today by people who say they know the mind of God.
And
I think quote a scripture to reveal it.
And I think the way we should deal with them is to say, well, that's very interesting, because now you've got a real problem. Since the rest of us don't know the mind of God, we can't share your direct line, so you're going to have to do the best you can in a secular discussion about what the right thing to do is. Are you up to the task of explaining to the rest of us who don't have your hotline to God why you're right? And don't just tell me that God told you. We know that. We accept that.
Suppose I'm sitting here, I'm a Muslim, and I say to you, look, book 5, verse 44 condemns apostasy and says the heretic should be put to death. And I'm telling you that this is my holy script, and I believe that is the case. What do you say to me?
I say, well, the fact that it says it in your holy text is an interesting historical fact, but it doesn't settle whether it's right. It just doesn't.
But it settles for me, speaking for the Muslim, that it's true.
Well, it is possible, of course, that many people are simply morally incapacitated for engaging in moral deliberation.
How come? You have to do it. Wouldn't you have to submit that to a scientific test of observation and verification?
If they can't hold a discussion, a reasonable, respectful political discussion about these issues without simply playing the faith card, then I guess they have to admit that they can't defend what they're saying. I think the big problem that we have is we have been too willing just to let people play the faith card, and it just trumps everything. And it might have been all right, except it's being abused a great deal around the world today. And I think, and besides, nobody believes that. Let's face it. If somebody came up and said, look, my religion says that well, I don't have to make up a case. I'm going to take the case of apostasy you just mentioned. There are clerics in Islam right now who say, death for apostasy, that's our religion, and we should do it. And I think everybody in the world should stand up and say, don't be ridiculous. Don't be silly. That is barbaric. It is simply beyond the pale. It doesn't matter what your tradition is. This is not a tradition that should be honored.
Yeah, the church wants it. The Catholic Church once put heretics to the stake.
Absolutely right. And they've learned better, haven't they?
They have learned.
And I think we should not be afraid to say to the Muslim world, come on, wake up. We made this mistake in the past too, we Christians. But we're not making it anymore. We Jews, that certainly Christians and Jews certainly made that mistake in the past.
When I read this book, there were so many themes running through it. You'll see my margins are pink and red and yellow.
Oh, good. That's what I wanted to do.
But the thing I wrote in one margin was, you